The champagne glasses clinked under the soft glow of the chandeliers as the couple strutted arrogantly into the most exclusive lounge of the city's luxury skyscraper hotel. They weren't invited. They weren't even on the list. But with a smirk of entitlement, they slid confidently into a prime corner booth, an obsidian leather VIP table reserved for the city's wealthiest elites. The waiter hesitated, whispering nervously that the table was taken. The man waved him off. The woman laughed, her voice sharp, carrying across the room. "It's empty, isn't it? Who's going to stop us?" Every eye turned toward them, power brokers, celebrities, diplomats, all watching the intruders occupy what had always been considered untouchable ground. Then, silence. A tall, sharply dressed black man stepped forward, his presence commanding, his calm smile sharper than any confrontation. He placed his glass down slowly on the table they had stolen. The couple stiffened. With deliberate calm, his words cut through the heavy air. "You're sitting at my table. In fact, I own this place." The woman's laugh died in her throat. The man's arrogance faltered. The room held its breath, knowing this wasn't just a clash of egos. This was about to become a story of legacy, prejudice, and power turned on its head. The Eclipse Lounge sat on the 72nd floor of the Meridian Tower, a glass and steel monument to wealth that dominated the city skyline. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the metropolis sprawled below like a carpet of lights, pulsing with life, yet somehow distant, untouchable from this height. Inside, the air itself seemed refined, filtered through systems that removed not just dust but the very essence of ordinary existence. This wasn't merely a hotel bar. It was a sanctuary for those who shaped industries, moved markets, and whispered decisions that rippled through economies. The entrance required more than money. It demanded connection, legacy, a name that opened doors without needing to knock. Security personnel in tailored suits stood at attention, their earpieces and watchful eyes ensuring that only the worthy crossed the threshold into this rarefied atmosphere. The decor spoke in hushed tones of old money and new power, Italian marble underfoot, artwork that belonged in museums gracing the walls, furniture designed by names most people had never heard, but that cost more than annual salaries. The bar itself stretched along one wall, backlit bottles arranged like jewels in a crown, each one representing decades of craftsmanship or rarity that commanded four figures for a single pour. But even among all this deliberate opulence, one spot held special significance. The corner booth, positioned where two walls of windows met, offered a panoramic view that made guests feel as though they were suspended in the night sky itself. The table was fashioned from a single slab of black granite, polished to mirror perfection, surrounded by leather seating the color of midnight. A small brass plaque embedded in the table simply read "Reserved." No name. No explanation needed. This table had hosted senators, debating policy over single malt scotch, tech moguls sketching billion-dollar deals on napkins, celebrities escaping the glare of public attention for a few precious hours. It represented the pinnacle of social currency, in a room already drowning in privilege. And on this particular Friday evening, as the lounge hummed with the conversations of the city's elite, two people who had no business being there decided that privilege was something you could simply take. Marcus and Jennifer Hartwell arrived, with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. They swept through the entrance, Marcus flashing a membership card that belonged to his brother-in-law, a detail he conveniently omitted when the hostess glanced at it. Jennifer's designer dress was authentic, but purchased on credit she couldn't afford, worn like armor against the possibility of being recognized as ordinary. They had crashed exclusive events before, trading on proximity to wealth rather than possessing it themselves. Marcus worked in commercial real estate, successful enough to afford a comfortable life but nowhere near the stratosphere represented by the Eclipse Lounge. Jennifer managed a boutique marketing firm, her clients respectable but unremarkable. Together, they had cultivated an image that exceeded their reality, investing heavily in appearances while their actual bank accounts told a different story. But appearance was everything in their world. And tonight, they had decided that the VIP table, empty, gleaming, impossibly tempting, was theirs for the taking. "Look at that," Jennifer murmured, her eyes fixing on the corner booth as they entered. "It's just sitting there. Empty." Marcus followed her gaze, and something shifted in his expression. A calculation. A dare he was giving himself. "Why not?" he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We're already here. Who's going to know?" They moved toward it with false casualness, trying to appear as though they belonged, as though this was always the plan. Other guests noticed immediately. In a room where everyone knew everyone or knew of them, strangers stood out like discordant notes in a symphony. The couple slid into the booth, Jennifer running her hand appreciatively over the smooth leather. Marcus leaned back, spreading his arms across the backrest, claiming the space with his body language. A waiter approached within seconds, a young man named David whose training emphasized discretion above all else. "Excuse me," David said softly, bending slightly to be heard without broadcasting to the entire room. "I'm afraid this table is reserved for." "We'll take 2 glasses of your finest champagne," Marcus interrupted, not bothering to look at him. "The Dom Perignon, if you have it." David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sir, I need to inform you that this particular table is permanently reserved. I'd be happy to arrange seating for you elsewhere in the lounge." Jennifer turned to him with a smile that never reached her eyes. "It's empty, isn't it?" Her voice carried, deliberate and sharp. "We're here now. We're ordering. So unless someone is actually coming." She let the sentence hang, the implication clear. "Prove it, or leave us alone." David glanced toward the bar, catching the eye of his manager, a woman named Patricia who had worked at the Eclipse Lounge for nearly 2 decades. She was already moving toward them, her expression carefully neutral but her pace suggesting urgency. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked, his tone shifting toward aggression, sensing the mounting attention. He wanted to establish dominance before anyone could challenge his right to be there. "No problem at all," Patricia said smoothly as she arrived. "But I do need to explain that this table is held under a permanent reservation. The owner is particular about—" "The owner," Marcus scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "The owner of what? This booth? Come on. Look around," he gestured at the lounge. "Half the tables are empty. You're really going to kick paying customers out of one seat because of some imaginary reservation?" Patricia's professional mask slipped for just a fraction of a second, revealing something colder underneath. "Sir, I'm not asking you to leave the lounge. I'm asking you to move to one of several other available tables, all of which offer excellent." "We're comfortable here," Jennifer said, cutting her off. She picked up the menu, making a show of studying it. "Unless you want to physically remove us, I suggest you take our order." The room had gone quiet. Conversations didn't stop entirely, but they dropped to whispers, heads turning to watch the confrontation unfold. In the Eclipse Lounge, scenes like this simply didn't happen. The screening process, the exclusivity, the unspoken rules, they all existed to prevent exactly this kind of moment. But here it was, happening anyway. And everyone present could sense that something more than a seating dispute was unfolding. Patricia straightened, her decision made. "I'll be right back," she said crisply, then turned and walked toward the private elevator at the back of the lounge, the one that led to the penthouse suites above. Marcus watched her go with satisfaction. "See," he said to Jennifer. "These people are all about appearances. Call their bluff, and they fold." Jennifer laughed, the sound brittle and triumphant. "Exactly. Act like you belong and people assume you do." She raised her hand, snapping her fingers at David, who still stood nearby. "Still waiting on that champagne." David nodded once, his face expressionless, and retreated to the bar. But he didn't place the order. Instead, he began preparing the table, straightening place settings, adjusting the lighting, performing a ritual that the regular guests recognized immediately. Someone was coming. Among the other patrons, reactions varied. At one table, a tech entrepreneur who had sold his startup for $300 million leaned toward his companion and whispered, "They have no idea what they just did." His tone mixed amusement with secondhand embarrassment. At another table, a prominent attorney shook her head slowly. She had seen the owner of the Eclipse Lounge negotiate deals that made grown executives weep. She knew exactly how this was going to end, and part of her felt genuine pity for the couple who had walked into a trap of their own making. A famous actress, seated with her agent, simply watched in fascination. She had learned long ago that real power never needed to announce itself. It simply existed, patient and inevitable as gravity. The minutes stretched. Marcus and Jennifer tried to maintain their confident facade, but the weight of attention was becoming uncomfortable. They could feel the eyes on them, the whispered conversations, the sense of anticipation building like pressure before a storm. Jennifer leaned closer to Marcus. "Maybe we should." "No," he said firmly, though his voice had lost some of its earlier certainty. "We're fine. They're just trying to intimidate us." Then the private elevator doors opened. He stepped out, with the kind of unhurried grace that comes from never needing to prove anything to anyone. 6 feet 3 inches tall, his frame carried muscle earned from decades of discipline, rather than vanity. His suit was dark navy, perfectly tailored, the fabric so fine it caught the light with subtle shifts of color. No tie, the collar of his white shirt open at the throat suggesting someone beyond caring about convention, but it was his face that held attention. Strong features, intelligent eyes that took in everything with a single sweep of the room, and an expression that managed to be both welcoming and absolutely unreadable. His hair was close-cropped, showing threads of silver at the temples that added gravitas rather than age. Maxwell Harrison was 61 years old. He was worth $7.3 billion. And he owned the Meridian Tower, the Eclipse Lounge, and 4 other properties in the city that most people assumed belonged to large corporations or old money dynasties. They assumed wrong. Patricia met him as he emerged from the elevator, speaking quietly. He listened, nodded once, then placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance that spoke volumes about his character. Then he began walking toward the corner booth, his pace unhurried, his expression unchanged. The room fell completely silent now. Marcus saw him first. Something in the way the man moved triggered an instinct, a warning that his conscious mind tried to override but his nervous system registered immediately. This was not a hotel employee coming to negotiate. This was something else entirely. Jennifer sensed her husband's tension and looked up. Her practiced smile faltered as she took in the figure approaching them. The way every other person in the lounge tracked his movement, with a mixture of respect and anticipation. Maxwell reached the table and stopped. For a long moment, he simply stood there, looking at the 2 people occupying his seat. His expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes, a sharpness, an assessment made it clear that he saw everything. Not just their presence in his booth, but the entirety of who they were and how they had arrived at this moment. He picked up his glass from where a waiter had placed it on a nearby side table. Slowly, deliberately, he set it down on the black granite surface directly in front of Marcus. The sound of glass meeting stone echoed in the silence. "You're sitting at my table," Maxwell said. His voice was quiet, but it carried deep, measured, with an accent that spoke of East Coast education layered over Southern roots. In fact, he paused, letting the moment expand. "I own this place." Jennifer's face drained of color. The laugh that had been building in her throat died before it could emerge, leaving her mouth slightly open, frozen in an expression somewhere between disbelief and dawning horror. Marcus tried to rally. "Look, we didn't know. I mean, nobody said." His words tumbled out, each one weaker than the last. "Nobody said?" Maxwell's eyebrow raised fractionally. "You were told 3 times in the last 10 minutes. By the host. By my waiter. By my general manager." He gestured to each person in turn, his hand moving with precise economy. "You chose not to listen. We thought it was just," Jennifer started, but her voice cracked. "I mean, there are empty tables everywhere, and we didn't think—" "You didn't think it mattered," Maxwell finished for her. "You didn't think rules applied to you. You didn't think anyone would actually challenge you." He tilted his head slightly, studying them with the detached interest of a scientist observing specimens. "And somewhere underneath all that, I suspect you didn't think someone who looked like me could possibly be telling you what to do." The accusation hung in the air, unspoken but understood. Marcus's face flushed deep red. "Now wait just a minute. That's not fair. We never said anything about—" "You didn't have to say it," Maxwell interrupted, his voice still quiet, still calm. "It was in every dismissive gesture. Every time you waved away my staff. Every assumption you made about who belonged here and who didn't." He pulled out a chair from an adjacent table, turned it around, and sat down, now at eye level with them but blocking their exit from the booth. "So let me be very clear. This isn't my table because I made a reservation. It's my table because I built this building. I designed this lounge. I hired every person who works here. And I decide who gets to enjoy the space I created." Jennifer was trembling now. "We're sorry," she whispered. "We didn't mean—" "You meant exactly what you did," Maxwell said, but his tone held no anger. "Just statement of fact. You saw something you wanted and decided to take it. The only thing you're sorry about is getting caught." Marcus tried one last time to salvage his dignity. "Fine. We'll move. Just point us to another table and—" "No," Maxwell said simply. The word landed like a physical blow. "No," Marcus repeated, confusion mixing with a new flavor of fear. "You had the opportunity to move. You were offered alternatives. You chose confrontation instead of cooperation." Maxwell leaned back in his chair, the gesture somehow both relaxed and commanding. "Now I'm choosing something different." He looked past them, addressing the room at large, though his voice remained conversational. "I bought this building 37 years ago," he began. "I was 24 years old. I had exactly $7,200 in my bank account. And I was 3 months behind on rent for a studio apartment in a neighborhood most of you have never heard of." The audience in the Eclipse Lounge leaned in, some of them hearing this story for the first time, others recognizing it as the legend they'd heard whispered but never confirmed. "I grew up in Atlanta," Maxwell continued. "Grew up poor, the kind of poor where you wear the same clothes to school every day and hope nobody notices. where dinner is whatever your mother can make from government commodities and the neighbor's charity. My father left before I could remember him. My mother worked 3 jobs and still couldn't keep the lights on every month. Jennifer and Marcus sat frozen, trapped not just by Maxwell's presence but by the story unfolding, aware that every eye in the room was on them. I was good at math, Maxwell said. Scholarship good. Full ride to college good. Got my degree in economics, then my MBA from Wharton. Worked at investment banks where I was the only person who looked like me on the entire floor. Watched mediocre colleagues get promoted over me, because they played golf at the right club, because their daddy knew somebody, because I didn't fit their picture of success. His voice never rose. Never sharpened with bitterness. He recounted these facts with the same calm as if reading from a balance sheet. So I left. Started my own firm. Bought distressed properties nobody wanted, in neighborhoods everybody had written off. Worked 90-hour weeks. Slept in my office. Ate 1 meal a day to save money. And slowly, very slowly I built something. He gestured around the lounge. This building was my first major acquisition. Everyone told me I was crazy. The previous owner was desperate to sell. The location was considered past its prime, and I was offering a price that required me to mortgage everything I owned and borrow from people who charge interest rates that would make you weep. A few nervous laughs rippled through the watching crowd. But I saw what this place could be, Maxwell continued. I saw the skyline growing around it, the neighborhood revitalizing, the potential for something extraordinary. I purchased it for $16.5 million. Today, this building alone is worth somewhere north of $300 million. Jennifer made a small sound, something between a gasp and a whimper. I worked on this building myself, in those early days, Maxwell said. Physically worked painting walls, installing fixtures, scrubbing floors. Because I couldn't afford enough contractors, and because I needed to understand every inch of the place I was betting my entire future on. He pointed upward, toward the ceiling. I designed this lounge myself. Drew the plans, selected every piece of furniture, chose the color of the napkins. This corner booth, he tapped the table lightly. I had this table custom-made from granite quarried in Brazil. Cost $28,000 just for the stone. Another $12,000 for the installation. Marcus looked like he might be sick. I don't sit here often, Maxwell admitted. Maybe once a month, if that. But I keep it reserved because this spot represents something to me. It's the best seat in a room I created from nothing. It's proof that the kid who couldn't afford dinner got to design a place where people pay $50 for an appetizer. He leaned forward now, his gaze moving between Jennifer and Marcus, pinning them in place. So, when you waltzed in here tonight, with your borrowed confidence and your casual dismissal of everyone who tried to show you respect, you weren't just taking a table. You were saying that my work doesn't matter. That my success is something you're entitled to sample. That the rules that apply to everyone else don't apply to you. We didn't know, Marcus managed, his voice barely above a whisper. That's the problem, Maxwell said. You didn't know, and you didn't care to know. You saw an empty seat and assumed it was yours for the taking. You never stopped to wonder why it was empty. Never considered that maybe, just maybe, there was a reason. He stood up, the movement fluid despite his height. You know what the saddest part is? If you had asked if you had come to any member of my staff and said, "We love this table, is there any way we could sit here?" I probably would have said yes. I'm not unreasonable. I don't hoard my success. I've bought drinks for strangers, given away tables to celebrating couples, helped launch businesses for people with good ideas, and no capital. The weight of what they'd lost settled visibly on the couple's shoulders. But you didn't ask, Maxwell continued. You demanded. You dismissed. You acted like you owned something that you hadn't earned. And that I can't respect. Around the room, heads nodded. The tech entrepreneur murmured damn right under his breath. The attorney took a sip of her wine, satisfied. The actress found herself blinking back, unexpected emotion, moved by the quiet dignity of the man before her. Patricia approached from the side, her earlier professional mask, replaced with something warmer pride, perhaps, in working for someone who could turn a moment of conflict into a lesson. Maxwell noticed her arrival, and nodded slightly. Patricia, would you please escort Mr. and Mrs. He paused, realizing he didn't know their names. Would you please escort our guests to the exit? Of course, Patricia said. Jennifer finally found her voice, though it came out small and broken. Can we at least could we just have a drink before we go? We didn't mean any disrespect, we just. You just wanted what you wanted, Maxwell said, not unkindly. I understand that. But you can't apologize your way past consequences. The time for making different choices was when you first sat down. Every moment after that, was a decision to keep going down the wrong path. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the exit with courteous firmness. The Eclipse Lounge isn't accepting your business tonight. Or any night going forward. You're welcome to visit any of my other properties in the city, the Hartwell Hotel, the Riverside Restaurant, the Oakmont Theater, but not this one. Not here. Marcus stood on unsteady legs, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. Jennifer followed, her designer dress suddenly looking like costume rather than couture, her careful makeup unable to hide the shame burning in her cheeks. They began the long walk toward the exit, Patricia, a respectful but firm presence behind them. Every eye in the room tracked their movement, not with glee or mockery, but with the somber attention of people who had just witnessed something significant. As they reached the entrance, Marcus turned back one last time. "For what it's worth," he said, his voice catching. "You built something really special here." Maxwell, who had returned to his table, looked up. His expression softened fractionally. "Thank you," he said simply. "I appreciate that." Then they were gone, disappeared into the elevator, destined to become a cautionary tale whispered over expensive drinks in exclusive venues across the city. Maxwell settled into his booth, and took a slow sip of his scotch. The tension that had filled the room began to dissipate, conversations gradually resuming, though the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. David approached with fresh water and a warm towel. "Will you be dining tonight, sir?" he asked. "I think I will," Maxwell replied, his voice warm now, the steel gone. "What does Chef have that's special?" As David recited the evening's offerings, others in the lounge began to approach. The tech entrepreneur stopped by the table, extending his hand. "Maxwell Harrison?" "James Chin. I've been trying to get a meeting with you for 6 months." Maxwell shook his hand firmly. "Have your people contact Patricia. We'll set something up." The attorney came next, not to pitch, but to say, "That was masterfully handled." Not everyone would have shown that much restraint. "I've been on the other side of that conversation," Maxwell said quietly. "Different circumstances, same feeling of being put in your place. I remember what it feels like." One by one, nearly every person in the lounge found a reason to stop by the corner booth. Some offered congratulations, others simply nodded with respect. A few shared their own stories of fighting their way up from nothing. Through it all, Maxwell remained gracious but modest, accepting the attention without seeking it, redirecting praise toward his team, his mentors, the opportunities he'd been fortunate enough to recognize. When the last well-wisher returned to their table, Patricia approached. "You know they'll tell everyone they know about what happened tonight," she said. Maxwell smiled slightly. "Good. Maybe it'll prevent the next person from making the same mistake." He paused, swirling the scotch in his glass. "Or maybe it won't. People believe what they want to believe." "You could have humiliated them," Patricia observed. "You showed more mercy than they probably deserved." "Maybe," Maxwell acknowledged. "But humiliation doesn't teach anything except resentment. I wanted them to understand, really understand what they did wrong. Not just that they got caught, but why it was wrong in the first place." He looked out the window at the city below, the lights of countless lives playing out in towers and streets. Each person with their own struggles, their own victories, their own moments of crossing lines they shouldn't cross. "I've spent my entire adult life proving I belong in rooms like this," Maxwell said softly. "I've sat through meetings where people spoke to me like I was help. I've had security called because someone assumed I was in the wrong place. I've worked twice as hard for half the recognition." He turned back to Patricia. Tonight was their moment to learn what that feels like. Not from the same angle, but the same lesson. Respect isn't about what you can take, it's about what you earn. Patricia nodded, her eyes bright. 20 years I've worked for you, and I still learn something new every time I watch you handle these situations." 20 years, Maxwell repeated, shaking his head with wonder. "Has it really been that long?" 21 next month, Patricia confirmed. "Then I think we're overdue for a celebration," Maxwell said. "Put together a dinner for the entire staff. Somewhere nice, maybe the Riverside." "My treat." Patricia smiled. "I'll arrange it." She hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I'm proud to work for you." Maxwell felt something catch in his throat, emotion he rarely allowed himself in public. "That means more than you know," he said quietly. As the evening wore on, Maxwell sat in his corner booth, sometimes looking out at the city, sometimes reading through documents Patricia brought him, sometimes simply observing the room he had created. The Eclipse Lounge thrummed with energy again, the earlier confrontation already becoming memory, already transforming into story. But the lesson lingered in the air like perfume, subtle, persistent, impossible to ignore. A young couple entered, clearly nervous, clearly out of their depth in such surroundings. David seated them at a modest table near the window, and Maxwell watched as they stared wide-eyed at the menu, at the view, at the impossible elegance surrounding them. After a few minutes, Maxwell caught David's eye and gestured subtly. The waiter approached, bent to listen, nodded with a smile. A moment later, David arrived at the young couple's table with 2 glasses of champagne. "Compliments of the gentleman in the corner," he explained. "Welcome to the Eclipse Lounge." The young man looked over, met Maxwell's eyes, and raised his glass in thanks. Maxwell returned the gesture. Because that was the difference, wasn't it? Between taking and giving. Between demanding and earning. Between assuming the world owed you something and recognizing that everything worth having required work, respect, and humility. Maxwell had built an empire, but he had never forgotten the studio apartment with no heat. The scholarships that saved his life. The mentors who saw potential in a young black man when others saw only risk. The tiny kindnesses that accumulated into opportunities, into hope, into the foundation for everything that came after. He had learned, painfully and completely, that success without character was just wealth. That power without responsibility was just privilege. That owning the building meant nothing if you didn't respect the people inside it. The couple who had occupied his table would tell their story, certainly. They would cast themselves as victims of overzealous management or selective enforcement. They might even convince themselves that they had done nothing wrong, that Maxwell had overreacted, that the whole thing was unfair. But somewhere, maybe late at night, when they couldn't sleep, they would remember. Remember the quiet man who had built something from nothing. Remember the lesson they had been too arrogant to learn before it cost them. Remember the moment when entitlement met consequence and lost. And maybe, just maybe, that memory would change them. Maxwell finished his drink, signed the check though nothing in his own establishment ever cost him money, and stood to leave. As he walked toward the private elevator, he paused by the young couple's table. "Enjoying your evening?" he asked. "It's incredible," the young woman breathed. "We've been saving up for 2 years to come here." Maxwell smiled. "Then I'm glad you made it. This place," he gestured around the room, "it's meant to be enjoyed. By people who appreciate it. Who respect it." He met her eyes, then her partner's. "By people who understand that special places stay special because we treat them that way." "We will," the young man promised. "Thank you for the champagne." "Thank you for being here," Maxwell replied. He continued to the elevator, Patricia holding the door. As it closed, sealing him away from the lounge, from the evening's drama, from the watchful eyes of the city's elite, Patricia spoke one last time. "You know, most people in your position would have just had them thrown out. No speech. No explanation. Just gone." Maxwell smiled wearily. "Most people in my position started in very different places than I did. They don't remember what it's like to feel small. To be dismissed. To have someone look at you and decide you don't matter." The elevator rose toward his penthouse, toward the quiet spaces where he could finally be simply Maxwell, not the billionaire, not the owner, not the man who had to prove anything to anyone. "I remember," he said quietly. "And because I remember, I have a choice. To use that memory as an excuse to be cruel, or as a reason to be better." The elevator doors opened to his private floor. Maxwell stepped out, then turned back to Patricia. "Tomorrow morning, have someone send a note to that couple. The Hartwells. Tell them they're welcome to visit the Riverside for dinner on me. One-time offer, no strings attached." Patricia's eyebrows rose. "After everything tonight?" "Especially after tonight," Maxwell said. "They got the lesson. Now they get to see the grace. That's how people really change, not just through punishment, but through contrast. Show them both sides." Patricia nodded, understanding dawning. "You're a better man than most, Maxwell Harrison." "I'm just a man," Maxwell replied. "One who got lucky. Who got chances. Who got to build something that mattered." He smiled. "And who believes that everyone deserves at least one more chance than they probably should get." The elevator doors closed. Patricia descended back to the Eclipse Lounge, back to the quiet hum of excellence and power. Back to the corner booth that sat empty once more, waiting. Reserved. Always reserved. Not just for a person, but for an idea. The idea that respect is earned, not taken. That dignity matters more than dominance. That the measure of success isn't what you can afford to buy, but what you choose to build. And in a city full of tall buildings and expensive views, in a room suspended between earth and sky, that idea glowed like the lights below, persistent, steady, illuminating the darkness with simple truth. The evening continued. Music played softly. Drinks were poured. Conversations flowed like water finding its level, each person in the Eclipse Lounge carrying their own stories, their own struggles, their own moments of understanding what truly matters. And at the corner booth, the black granite surface reflected the chandelier light, empty and perfect, and ready for the next time Maxwell Harrison decided to sit in the seat he had earned through years of work, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to being better than the world expected him to be. The city stretched endlessly below, full of people grasping for power, for recognition, for the right to claim they belonged among the elite. But on the 72nd floor of the Meridian Tower, in a corner booth worth $40,000, surrounded by the tangible proof of impossible dreams made real, one lesson echoed through the carefully conditioned air: belonging is not something you take, it's something you build. One choice at a time. One act of respect at a time. One moment of choosing grace over cruelty, understanding over judgment, and earned authority over assumed entitlement. Maxwell Harrison knew this truth in his bones. He had lived it, breathed it, built his entire empire on its foundation. And tonight, in the most gentle way possible, he had taught it to two people who desperately needed to learn. The champagne glasses clinked. The city glowed. And the corner booth sat waiting, reserved for the man who owned not just the building, but the responsibility that came with it.